Welcome to this painting tutorial. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this video, and in this video we're going to look at how to paint Untamed Beasts for the new game for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, Warcry. These warriors draw their power from beasts and wear very little metal. To paint these warriors we're going to need to paint a ton of bone, a lot of earth tones. I feel this was relatively easy to paint and most colors are easy to apply. I hope you enjoyed this video and don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos of mine in the future. And with all that out of the way, we're going to start. I'm going to start by priming the model. For that, I'm going to use Vallejo Surface Primer Gray through an airbrush. You can use any primer that you like. I would recommend using a light one. And this is very close to Gray Seer, so you can use that if you really want to use the Games Workshop stuff. We're using a light gray tone because it's going to be easier to cover with the colors that we're going to use. And the first color that I'm going to use is actually called Bloodreaver Flesh. This is a new color and wasn't aware it existed, but once I saw it, I was inspired to paint these guys on a tanned or darker skin tone. And with this color, I'm going to start base coating all of the flesh of this model. And this is because this is the detail that is more underneath everything else. And it's going to be easier to paint it now and then clean up later and then paint everything else on top of it. Don't forget to thin down your colors. I'm using a wet palette right now to keep the colors thin. And I'm going to apply 2 coats. And once it's done, I'm going to move on. I'm going to continue applying coats of paint so that we get to a point where we can call it a battle ready model. And I'm going to just lay out colors. I'm going to start with black, and this is because most of the details are going to be black. The pelt and most of the leather straps and stuff like that, and the wrappings on the feet are going to be black. So I'm going to color those right now. I'm using a small detail brush to paint all of the areas that are kind of small so that I don't mess it up, and I'm going to paint the surroundings of the bigger areas. And once I'm done with that, I can use a bigger brush to start painting the rest of the areas. Once that's done, I'm going to paint the wrappings on the upper parts, on the wrists, and I'm going to use Stormvermin Fur. This is a earthy toned gray that I like very much, and I'm going to use this just on the wrist straps, and that's going to be it. I'm trying not to paint on the bone areas because I'm going to use a little bit of contrast paint to paint those. And that's okay if you get a little bit of paint, but I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible. Next, we're going to use Doombull Brown, and this is going to go over all of the areas that I want to be a reddish brown. And this is pretty much just the axe grip and the loincloth. If you find any other areas that you want to paint this color, you can use this color. Again, just like other colors, be careful not to paint on areas that you've already painted, and also avoid painting the bone. And if you do thin coats, you'll get a much better result with all of the paints. After a couple coats of that, I'm going to use silver, and for that I'm going to use Leadbelcher. And with this color, I'm going to paint the helmet and the chainmail. Just thin it down a little bit so you don't cover detail, and so it flows into those crevices on the chainmail. And it's just these 2 small details. Try not to paint on any of the other areas that we've already painted. The model is starting to come together, and I'm going to continue painting a little bit of gold with Retributor Armor. And this is going to be just a couple details on the front of the belt and on the pelt on the back. There's a little chaos star that we can paint in gold color. Once that's done, most of the colors on this model are down. I'm going to move on to paint the bone, and I'm going to use 2 different colors. I'm going to start with the lighter bone with a little bit of gray seer. This is going to be to clean up all of the areas that we painted accidentally with other colors, because we need a good base coat of a light gray on these areas. This is going to be just pretty much the head of the axe. Some details here and there that you want to be a yellowish, a little bit lighter bone, and that's going to be it. Just give it a good coat of this color. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to use a contrast paint, and this is the only paint that I'm not going to thin down. Shake it well just to make sure that it's well mixed. And I'm going to lay down a thick coat of this. It looks more like a wash, and it's going to go over all of the details on the bone color that we want to be lighter. The rest of the bone is going to be a little bit more difficult, and it's going to involve a little bit more steps, but this is going to be an easy one. You can paint all of the bone areas if you want with this technique, and you can save a little bit of time, or you can be like me and start working in a gradient for all of the rest of the bone colors to make it a little bit more difficult and a little bit more interesting. I'm going to start with Dryad Bark, and this is going to cover the whole area of all of the rest of the remaining bone colors, and that's going to be it. I'm also coloring the pelt. I'm going to color a small area with the brown, and then I'm going to move on to Steel Legion Drab, and I'm going to work my way out into a lighter bone color so that I can make a transition of colors. On the top of the horns, I'm going to leave a little bit of the brown towards the base and towards the tip, and I'm going to just color in this color into the whole bone area. And into the teeth, I'm just going to color in towards the tip, just leaving a little bit of the brown on the base of those teeth. And don't worry if it doesn't look very smooth, your transition between brown and lighter brown, because it's going to be unified at the end with a wash, and that's going to blend them all together, and it's okay. Next, I'm going to use a little bit of Baneblade Brown, and I'm going to repeat the same process, just a little bit towards more in the middle on the horns, but in the teeth it's going to be more towards the tips. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the couple colors that I've already painted, just leaving a little bit of this to show, and start to working out into a lighter and lighter color towards the very edge. Once that's done, we're going to continue using a lighter tone, and for that I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh. This is the lighter tone that I'm going to use, and I'm going to do the same thing. Leave a little bit of the other three colors that we've already used towards the base of those teeth and towards the tip and base of those horns, and I'm going to start painting just the middle part of the horns and the very tips on those teeth. Once that's done, we're done with all of the colors. The model is completely covered in paint, and I'm going to start washing this model with Agrax Earthshade. Because all of the colors are going to be earth tones, I'm going to use this all over, just avoiding the parts that we use the contrast paint for the lighter bone. But we're going to completely cover the horns, the skin, and all of the leather areas and the metal. Just make sure to shake well your Agrax Earthshade so it doesn't frost or becomes glossy, because whenever the medium and stuff inside the wash is not shaken well, it can make funny stuff like that. Once that's done, you can call this your tabletop ready Untamed Beast model for Warcry. It looks pretty good, but I'm going to continue highlighting, but you can leave it like this if you want. And I'm going to start with Bloodreaver Flesh again, and this is going to go over all of the skin area again just to clean it up, because Agrax Earthshade tends to make everything look dirtier. It goes into the cracks and looks pretty good. It gives instant shading, but it looks a little bit too dirty for me. So I'm going to clean it up with a little bit of more flesh tone, and I'm going to just pick on those muscles, leaving the recesses on the color that the wash left behind. Once that's done, I'm going to continue highlighting, and I'm going to use Knight-questor Flesh, and this is going to go over all of the muscles, pretty much over 60% to 70% of the muscles, just towards the upper parts. And if you use thin paint, the transition is going to look that much smoother. And that's it. I'm going to start painting each muscle individually, just giving it a little bit of highlight on the top parts, leaving about 40 to 50% on the bottom part, still showing as a shadow color. Once that's done, I'm going to give it an extreme highlight to the skin, and I'm going to use Cadian flesh tone. This is going to go over only the sharpest edges, and it's going to go on the tip of the nose, on the tip of that chin, on those knuckles, and on all of those little lines that are very sharp in between the muscles, so that we can get an extreme highlight and it looks a little bit more three-dimensional from afar. Once that's done, the skin looks like this, and I think it looks pretty good, pretty sharp, and it looks very three-dimensional. I'm going to move on to paint the fur, and for that I'm going to use Karak Stone, and I'm going to use a very dry brush to get these areas. And I'm going to try to make it as best as possible not to get into other details. So for that I'm going to use a small dry brush and just get into all those little pieces of fur. Once that's done, I'm going to give it a second highlight on these fur areas, and I'm going to use Ushabti Bone, and this is going to be a lighter dry brush just on the very tips of those fur little pieces of hair. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to highlight the black, and for that I'm going to use Dawnstone, and it's going to be just one highlight because it's a lot of edge highlights around, especially the feet. But I'm going to edge highlight all of the leather black straps around the model, and I'm going to highlight all of the straps on the feet and on the wrists as well. I'm going to highlight them with a small layer brush. Just try to pick those prominent edges on these areas just to give it a highlight. If you don't want, you can leave it as it is. I don't usually highlight black on tabletop models. Once that's done, the model looks pretty good at this point. We're going to continue highlighting and finish this model up. I'm going to start with the lighter bone areas, and I'm going to use a little bit of Screaming Skull. And this is going to be an edge highlight on those very sharp edges on the lighter bone color. It's not necessary, but it's going to give it an extra pop that is going to look very good. And it's not going to be just one application of contrast paint, and that's done. Once that's done, you can see it really brings up the color on that bone area. And I'm going to do the same thing for the reddish brown areas with Tuskgor Fur. And this is going to go over all of the strapping on the axe grip, and it's also going to go onto the loincloth. Just try to pick those edges as an edge highlight, and be very careful not to paint on the recesses or any other areas that we've finished. Once we're done with that, I'm going to go a little bit further in this color just because I want it to look a little bit brighter. I'm going to use a little bit of Cadian flesh tone, and this is going to go over only the sharpest edges on this model, just in the very corners on that loincloth and the very top parts of that grip on the axe. And this is going to go over the areas that light would hit on those edge highlights. Once that's done, I want to highlight the darker bone with a little bit of Palid witch flesh. And this you could dry brush it very lightly onto those ridges of the horns so that it's a little bit more subtle. But I'm going to use it as an edge highlight, and I'm going to do as thin as a line as I can on those ridges and on those edges of the bone and on the very tips of the teeth on the axe and any other part that we decided to make a dark bone color. Just be very careful not to paint on the darker recesses, because we're going to need those to show the transition of color that we made. Once that's done, we're going to give it a final highlight with Vallejo Model Air Steel. And this is a very finely powdered pigment paint, and it looks very shiny and very nice. I really love it. And I'm going to just pick those very sharp edges on the steel to make it look a little bit more shiny on those parts where it matters. And it's going to go over just the helmet and the chainmail, but a little bit on those very sharpest edges on the gold as well. And this is the finished model. I really had a lot of fun painting this model, and I'm very proud of the way it looks. I think it looks pretty cool, and I'm going to paint the rest of my Untamed Beasts this way. I'm just going to change a little bit of colors here and there. I can use different skin tones, different colors for the leather, and but pretty much it's going to be the same thing all around, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that you find it entertaining and helpful, and you can use it to paint your Untamed Beasts, or at least it can give you some ideas or some pointers so that you can start painting. And this is it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see something else, what you liked, what you didn't like, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thank you very much for watching. You stayed. Great. Thank you very much for supporting my channel, and if you would like to become a patron, there is a link to my Patreon page in the description below. Your contributions help pay for my work and keeps the channel going. A single $1 a month is more than enough, and you can cancel at any time. If you can't, don't worry, you can support my channel by simply watching my videos and sharing them with your friends. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.